Hello and welcome to Console Shock, Retro and Modern Gaming Chat with me, Trev, and as always, Stu.
Hey Trev, how you doing?
Yeah, usual bollocks. What about you? All good on your side?
Yeah, no, good. Just it's starting to enjoy the summer, but it's been raining all day today.
Oh,
but,
it's been horrendous.
I think it should be all right tomorrow. But
just when we thought it was kicking in, had a nice little day yesterday, didn't we? And on Sunday as well was all right. And now it's got a bit crap, hasn't it, today?
So, well, we'll keep the grass greener for a bit longer, won't it, through the summer?
Yeah. We're not going to get a drought, I guess, as things are going with the rain. No. So that's always good, isn't it? Something we're always worried about, with bloody droughts. I'm like,
yeah, I hate droughts.
Annoying. Not a fan at all.
No.
Get away from here, you bloody drought. That's what I say.
Yeah.
I'm very anti. I'm the kind of known. You know what? There's one thing about me that you might not be aware of. I kind of keep it sort of quiet, but I am very anti-drought.
Well, the problem with droughts, blooming Bob Geldof always has to come out and sing about them, doesn't he?
I know. I wish we'd have a drought of bloody Bob Geldof. That'd do everyone a favour, right?
Yeah, am I right?
We're recording this on a Monday as well, and he's not famous for liking Mondays, is he really? So, well, what can we talk about, Stu?
Well,
anything that you want to get into?
In the last podcast, I sort of insinuated that obviously I messed up my old retro computer, which I didn't really buy for very much money. I tried to change the BIOS, and anyway, it now doesn't work. So that's in the garage, out of the way, and I've bought myself.
Yes.
I went online and I found a seller on eBay that was selling this PC, and it was, I think, a very reasonable price. I'm sure I could have bought the bits separately and put it together myself, but it came with sort of quite a GeForce 750 card in there, a sort of a Pentium, sort of quite a low-end Pentium processor, but the game seemed to run okay. An SD drive in there as well, and OSD, solid SSD, sorry, and then it's just in my opinion, it's just sort of the perfect sort of sweet spot, because it's sort of powerful to play almost like the best games from the early 2000s era, and then because it's Windows XP, it's got a lot more backwards compatibility with the older, the Windows 95, Windows 98 kind of games, and potentially sort of DOS as well. So you've got a lot more options in that direction, and then it can play, and I've talked about this before, that my favourite sort of era of gaming where I absolutely loved it was the Xbox 360. And that for me was, so many good games came out. It felt, and this probably wasn't the case, but it felt like every other week was like another, AAA, AA, really good, game that would come out. And it's sort of that sort of kind of era that I'm trying to replicate, but in the PC world. And I'm finding that sort of another sort of good thing about it is I'll go to CEX, and I've got a pile of games here, which you can't see, but I'm going to read them out to you.
I'll trust you.
Battlefield 2, 75p. Far Cry 1, that was off eBay for about £2. Call of Duty 4, £3. Oblivion was about £1.50. Crysis was off eBay for, I think, another sort of couple of quid. And then Quake 4 was 75p from CEX. So there's so many sort of good games that you can go out and sort of pick up for it. And it seems it's really just like the sweet spot of, that type of game. And it's almost like I feel that this Windows XP PC that I was going to say built, but I bought off someone off eBay, and admittedly, I did plug in a second SSD into it, so I did a bit of building. But it's kind of like a hyped up, it's like an Xbox or 360,
You put an SSD in a computer.
I know.
Put the SSD in. Oh my God, you're like turning into LGR.
Yes, I did put an SSD in, and I managed to screw it into the frame as well. And it was So I'm really enjoying it. I think it's a really good machine.
Which Pentium does it have? A 3 or a 4 or
no? It's I say Pentium, but it's
Celeron.
No, it's in the same genre. Not genre. That's not the right word. But I could swap it out for an i7 2000 series or 3000 series. So it's not an i3 or an i5 or an i7 from the 2000 series. I think it's a Pentium. I want to say G750 or 680 or something. So, but the point is that because of the games I'm trying to play, it's like if I bought it at the time, it would have been, this is, a bit of a slow processor. But because I'm for a Windows XP computer, and I think this is correct, that it doesn't really use, like 4 cores or all these threads. It would just really use this sort of one core or maybe 2 cores, and that's all this one's got. So from that point of view, it's actually sort of really good. Because it's
not
like
the Irish. It's not like the Irish folk band The Cause. Then
it's not like the Irish.
That'll be
folk
several.
band.
There's several cores in that group. So yeah,
I think they're all cores.
I think so. Yeah, they don't hang around with cores in that band. Yeah.
No, I always had a bit of the hots for them back in the day.
Yeah, they weren't an ugly band. Let's put it that way.
No.
Sorry, did you say you got it? Was it eBay you got it, and then you just popped an SSD card in?
Yeah, so it actually had an SSD with it, but because I had the previous computer with an SSD, so I'd gone to the effort of installing all these games onto that SSD. So I just plugged it in, and then all the games, except for maybe 1 or 2 of them, worked absolutely fine. So where I progressed in games on the previous computer, plugging those in, and then maybe it came up with a message saying, the specifications of your computer have changed. We will change the the resolution and the bits and pieces. And so
you're able to get your save files off. You're able to recover those from the one that died.
Exactly. Yeah. So, for example, I completed Call of Duty, the original one, which I've never actually played before. So I've done all the other Call of Duties, but going back to play Call of Duty 1, it was
Call of Duty Oranges.
Origins. Yeah. So
and
it was really good.
You've got Far Cry Origins as well. You've got Call of Duty Origins, Far Cry Origins.
Yes.
Origins. Yes.
Anyway, so I could just load it all up, and it just played from where I left it off on the previous computer. So it made it almost seamless, really.
Yeah, like I mentioned to you, like before we started recording, that I didn't really play. I wasn't really gaming on a PC at all in that era. It was kind of I had a PC. I did have a PC. I had like an AMD. It was this was about 2003. I bought a new PC. This is about the time that PCs were getting fairly cheap, to the point where you could get something for under sort of £500 that was decent. And I was able to sort of saved up some money, and because I wanted to get a PC. Just before I went to uni, I kind of had a couple of years after I left sixth form, and then went to uni, where I was kind of just bouncing around random jobs, and I was able to get my hands on a brand new sort of cheap PC. But yeah, it wasn't in that XP era. So like, I think we'd probably define that. Well, it would be when XP came out, sort of 2001, 2002, all the way up to 2010, I think. When XP was really starting to wind down as the main OS that a lot of people would have used, and 7 was kind of completely taking over at that point. But I actually didn't run XP on it. I think initially it came with XP.
You didn't put Vista on there, did you?
Well, this was 2003. Vista didn't exist at that point.
Oh, really?
Vista wasn't until about 3 years later. But I actually downgraded it to Windows 98 Second Edition, which at that point, was fairly old, but it was very stable, and everything was compatible with it at that point. Games coming out in 2003 were still sort of supporting Windows 98 Second Edition at that point, although it was kind of in the last few years of that. Well, really the last year or two of that being the case. But it had it was a very low end PC. It was like an AMD. I had an AMD Duron processor, which was, kind of the Celeron of AMD. So it was kind of a cut down version of their, main sort of powerful sort of line of chips, which is the Athlon, I think, at the time.
Athlon,
much like
yeah.
Celeron. Yeah, much like the Celeron was like the cut down version of the Pentium, and the sort of being cheaper, desktops and laptops. It was like that. So it wasn't really up to. It didn't have a proper graphics card. There was graphics on the actual motherboard itself. It had integrated graphics.
Oh,
but nothing that was, you can imagine
could
nowadays.
You play any games on it?
I did throw a few things on it. I remember downloading like the demo of like FIFA 2003 or something, and I remember getting that working on it, and I could run it all low. The whole thing would be on low settings, but just getting that going, just to play around on the demo, sort of made me realise that I'm not really going to be able to use this to any large degree. For gaming.
What make was the computer? Was it sort of tiny or a tiny machine?
It wasn't,
or there was loads of
pre-built brands, wasn't there? Yeah, but it wasn't at all. It was a guy that literally ran. I don't know if he exists anymore. Either as a person that's still alive or as a company, I don't really.
Let's hope he's still alive. Let's hope he's still alive and having a happy retirement.
Well, yeah, or continuing to sell computers, that would be great as well. But it was a chap, like a one-man band kind of thing. He was, God, I don't know where I saw, it might have been online, or it might have been like Micromart or something, but near to where I lived in Clacton-on-Sea, he ran like I said, a one-man band computer shop, basically out of a warehouse in an industrial estate. It was called like CompuSense, I think was the name it had. And he would build computers. He would get the parts and a case. He would throw them all together and sell them. So it wasn't really a particular maker or anything. It was just this guy built a bunch of computers and sold them. And I remember I went to go and pick it up, and it was like in a small unit in this warehouse or in this industrial estate. I remember his wife was there at the time, sort of feeding their baby. So she was obviously, helped him out with admin work, I think. And he would build the computers and sell them. And I picked up the computer and I took it home. And I remember after a few days, like the fan wasn't working properly, and I had to call him. And he came and he literally drove down in his car and just came and fixed it in my house, which is kind of funny. And I think I remember when I told him when I was ordering it from him, and I was trying to get I wanted the particular spec that I wanted out of the ones that he offered. I can't remember, but I think it was something weird, like it didn't even come, or it came with either a DVD drive or a CD drive. But the DVD drive was added on £100, because this was a time when DVD drives are still fairly expensive, But it wasn't a new thing, DVD. I mean, it had been around for a few years at that point, but it was still quite expensive. And I was like, you know what? I don't think I'm going to need a DVD drive. I'm going to save a bit of money and get the CD drive, just so I can install games. Most games still came on CDs in 2003 and software. And I remember, I think I already initially had an order, and I phoned him and said, can I just downgrade to the CD? And he got really annoyed with me on the phone. He was like, well, I've started building it now. And I was like, well, sorry, but I would like just the CD drive. And it was like, okay. And it was really, I mean, it's actually fairly quick to swap out an optical drive in a PC. I don't know if he was having a
It,
bad day or something, but yeah, he was a little bit miffed with me. So yeah, it's funny I remembered that, but I got it, and yeah, it served me for a few years. In the end, I think my dad might still have it as a PC
really?
that I kind of gave it to him after I left I moved out of my parents. I gave it to him just to have as his computer, and he carried on using it for a few years. I eventually upgraded to an iBook G4 when I started uni. This is in 2005, so it's only like a couple of years. It was actually my sort of main go-to computer, and the G4 iBook was like blew away the AMD Duron. But yeah, so basically, I didn't really game on it at all. My gaming at that point in time, I had an Xbox and a GameCube. I kind of bounced between those two consoles. I'd still play my Dreamcast and my PS1 and stuff,
Well, that's
and things like that in that era. So yeah.
I think it was still sort of it was tough to get games running in some circumstances, and
it was harder, for sure.
Yeah, because I talking about DVD drives, Oh yeah, exactly. I remember when I was probably about sort of 20 or so, probably about year 2000 or maybe a year before that. I bought I had a PC, and then I worked in a pub and sort of basically lived with my nan. When I was, that age. So, I got all my money from, working 55 hours a week in the pub, and, having my meals paid for me, and, paying 20 quid a week sort of for housekeeping or whatever it was called. And I remember having a great time, and I always felt like I had loads of money because I had nothing to really spend it on. So I would go out, and I remember, I want a graphics card for it. So I bought a graphics card. And then I thought, well, I want a DVD drive. So I bought this kit, which had a decoder card in. So it had a decoder card, it had the DVD drive, and then you had to run the decoder card through your graphics card. So it could sort of play games and watch DVDs on it. So that was the first.
Yeah, DVD was quite a video stream from a DVD was very heavy on a computer when DVD.
Yeah, exactly. This had a special card, but I always remember thinking that I think I brought a few DVDs for it and watching them, and then the mouth never quite synced up with the voice, and then I was it was never great to watch. Yeah, it never felt good to watch on your desk, watch a film. And I still don't like doing that. I don't like sitting at a desk and watching a video. I'd rather do it on big screen and things like that. But I remember, I wish whatever that computer was with that graphics card, I'd wish I'd sort of kept that and as a bit of a go back and sort of use. But I still can't get over the fact that you had a Windows XP machine, and you thought, well, actually, this isn't. I want to go back to Windows 98, and that seems like
it was Windows XP didn't really become like massively like everybody had it. I feel like that wasn't really until the mid 2000s when they were already kind of trying to usurp it with Vista, which obviously didn't really work. But yeah, like I said, then I got to 2005, and I basically became a full-time Mac user, which I still am to this day, although I use PCs for gaming now. I didn't start to full-time PC game until I got my first gaming laptop in 2014. I was still consoles, and even though when I was a kid, my favorite gaming platform was a PC, the Commodore Amiga, so I was well used to. And I clearly, had a preference for doing gaming on a computer when I had one, hence the Amiga. But yeah, I mean, obviously, when I got that iBook, the ability to game on it was very limited. I mean, Macs had games, they've had games since the very beginning of the first Mac came out, but it was in that PowerPC era, sort of late PowerPC era, I would say, because they switched to Intel in 2006. Now they've switched away from that, which is kind of crazy, with ARM chips with the M1 and M2 and M3 now. There was very few games. People, there was a handful of companies that would port games. I remember buying I used to get Macworld every month. We've talked about that before in our magazine themed episodes that we've done. And I remember it being a big deal that Doom 3 was coming out on the Mac. They were making a Mac version. This was in like 2005. So the game was like 2 years old, or about a year and a half old by the time, a company, I think it was Aspire was the name of the company. And they basically just made every Mac game. And things like Star Wars Battlefront, I remember that coming out on the Mac and it being a big deal. But I never really made a big effort to try and get any games running on my iBook G4, probably because it was at the very low end of what Macs you could get in those days, and for anything that was kind of would run on a mediocre PC, you would probably need a high end Mac to run the Mac port. So something like Battlefront or I'm pretty sure Call of Duty 1 and 2 came out around that time on the Mac as well. They ported it over. You wouldn't really be able to get that to run very well. You probably would run, but it would be like low settings, 30 frames a second, maybe. And it was just like, I can't be bothered. I'm just going to play these games on an Xbox or a GameCube or whatever. It just wasn't really a valid platform. Plus, there wasn't really good controller support with Macs in those days. I mean, it's still not great these days. There's a lot more games now, but it's still not good. You wouldn't really have a Mac as your primary gaming computer, although there is some amazing software coming out that Apple, I think, are working on that allows Windows versions of games to run on Macs. I think it's experimental.
I think that's absolutely brilliant, and it's quite funny with the going a little bit off topic here, but there's a Reddit forum all about Mac gaming, and you see these people. I've managed to get I'm just reading out a random name here. Assassin's Creed Black Flag running on my Mac. You've got to do this. You've got to run it through this. You've got to run it through that, and then it runs about 25 frames a second. And I'm just like, hold on, this is just hassle. This is absolute hassle. And so I've got a Mac as well, and I love using the Mac. It's just such a convenient, open it up. It's just on, browse the internet and do a little bit of video editing. It works absolutely perfect. But when it comes to games, it's rubbish. It's rubbish. That's not what it's for. And obviously, I love it if there was some sort of option to, to make games a little bit easier to play. And fingers crossed that that will become a lot more sort of prominent. But for me, I can 100% agree with what you're saying, because to go back to sort of the Mac gaming in the early 2000s, where did you buy Mac games from? You had to go to the Apple store in Regent Street, or a specialist shop, or some mail order company, and you would say, the PC versions on sale at $9.99. Oh, the Mac version's $44.99, and it won't run as well. It's just obvious. I worked for Apple for a few years, and this was in the end of the 2000s. I left in 2011, but we had a very small Mac game area. It was like maybe a one little part of a tiny segment of a wall, a tenth of of the wall space, would be actual games. And the only ones that I really remember people buying was, I think they had Grand Theft Auto, the Grand Theft Auto trilogy. So 3, Vice City, and San Andreas, which were released for the Mac. But this was this would have been about 2008, 9, and that was a fairly new release. And those games were already a few years old at that point. And I think the fact that the Mac transitioned from PowerPC to Intel probably also kind of was a bit of a soft, caused delays and made it difficult for games to get ported again, even though PCs were Intel, x86. It didn't cause any kind of an explosion in games. But to be honest, it wasn't, that wasn't why I got a Mac. I mean, God, when I got that iBook, the Mac OS version at that point was Mac OS 10 Panther 10.3, and it was like a different planet to Windows at that time. Windows XP would have been, the
the adjacent sort of PC mainstream OS, but Mac OS 10 looked 10 years ahead. It just looked, the interface, the fonts, the icons, everything just looked like it made Windows XP look like MS DOS.
Windows XP, I think it's got a certain charm to it, but totally, it's all very, primary colors, the red, the blues, the greens, everything's got a curve to it. And when you see, because I've got a PowerPC G4 laptop, and that thing's got, and that just feels like, okay, I'm just using the same version. Obviously, it looks a little bit older than whatever version that's on.
It still looks good.
Yeah, I think,
Yeah,
it still looks absolutely brilliant. But sort of what I want to sort of touch upon is, I'll put it into the chat here. But PC games, and when did I'd say sort of Steam sort of take over? When did the online stores? Because I would say I've put in my sort of comments here. 2010 was. When did people stop buying sort of PC games on DVD or CD-ROMs? When did that happen? When do you think?
Yeah, I'd say that's probably fair to say. I mean, Steam started in 2004. Basically, when you bought Half-Life 2, you had to install Steam, which was kind of annoying for people at the time. And I think it was only there just to run, to run Half-Life 2. I don't know if Gabe Newell was already had. He probably did have thoughts that you could buy it digitally as well from Steam at that point. I think it was probably the only game that they sold. Maybe some of the other Valve games, and that was it. It wasn't until sort of a couple of years after that they started just selling third-party games. But yeah, 2010 is probably when it really started to kick in. And then, when I was still buying when I started. Full-time PC gaming, and I still am to this day. I was still buying stuff as DVDs off Amazon. I think the last sort of games though really that were on DVDs would have been mid 2010s. There's still the occasional special edition of a game that comes on a disc, but I've got some. I've got Mortal Kombat 10. That was on DVDs. FIFA 17 I've got on PC on DVDs. That came on 3 DVDs. I was like, bloody
3 DVDs?
3 DVDs. For FIFA 17. Grand Theft Auto 5. That came in a beautiful box set, like a DVD box set. Came on 7 DVDs, and you still had to download a bunch of gigs after that. A great example, though, was my girlfriend got me Metal Gear Solid 5 for the PC, which had a physical edition. But the disc just basically had Steam on it. There was one DVD inside. I was like, oh, I don't think this is going to be the whole install. Put it in my PC, and it was literally just the Steam downloader. I already had Steam installed, so I just put the code in that was in there. The CD key, and then it just downloaded a digital copy of the game from Steam. That would have been 2015 as well. So after that, apart from things like FIFA, like I said, which you might even still be able to get a physical copy of. Actually, you know what? When I was in Cyprus last year, I did see actually earlier this year. There's a game shop. They had a PC games section. This is in the shopping center too, and it had FC24 for the PC physical version. And I think it was DVDs as well. I don't think it was just a code in a box. I think we've touched on it before, but I think they do release physical copies where there's not great internet, so people do actually need. I was
about to say that. Yeah. So in areas where, so if you got to think, you got to download, 70 gigabytes, and then hold on, if you're, I don't know what Cyprus is like, but that could take you a week. So sort of download that game, or you could buy it and install it. So I think because I remember, I go to Malaysia sort of quite often, and when I'm out there was always a shop selling, copied sort of DVDs of games and stuff like that. And so I might be interested to sort of see if I can find any of those when I'm out there to sort of,
if I see FC24 in Cyprus again anytime soon, which I might well be, I'll probably pick up that if it's still there, or the next FIFA if it's the next one's out at that point. Because just have a PC version, a physical copy of that, and it's a game I would play on a PC. It'd work on my Legion Go. Unfortunately, FIFA doesn't work on EA Sports FC doesn't work on the Steam Deck yet. Apart from 22 does, but anything after that doesn't because of EA's anti-cheat software doesn't work in Proton. But yeah, it was an interesting era, that XP era. Like I said, I didn't personally game really, but some of the games that came out, I mean, the span of time it covers, and you've already touched upon it a little bit, but an XP era gaming PC, I mean, one that's potentially from 2004, 2005, you could run sort of DOS on that fairly easily. You could run DOS games fairly well. Some of the ones that really expect a certain CPU speed you might struggle with, but there are workarounds for that. You've got the Windows 95 and 98 games. Well, most of them will probably run pretty well under XP, as they're not too far away in terms of when they were in their heyday. And then you've got sort of 2001 to 2010, also your graphics card permitting. Era of games, so well into the Xbox 360 era, like your Crisis games and Oblivion and things like
Crisis,
like that.
Oblivion. I was playing Oblivion at the weekend. Yeah. I'm playing Call of Duty 4 at the moment, and it's absolutely awesome. But I think I was going to ask you a question, Trevor. Are you thinking about sort of picking up a Windows XP gaming PC? If one was in front of you, or maybe you spotted it on eBay for a good price, would you go down that route of picking one up?
A lot of those games are, like you say, you did a big sort of spree of buying a bunch of those old physical copies of those XP era games because they were so cheap. And yeah, there's absolutely tons of them. I mean, I've got a decent collection of physical copies of PC games. And yeah, the span of time it covers is insane, but I've got that Windows Vista laptop, which is from about 2009, 2010. Actually, might be a bit before that. It's actually before that. It's Windows Vista based, so that'd be about 2007. But I haven't thought about that. I could probably downgrade that to XP because it's from that era. There probably are. It's Acer, so there's probably drivers. I don't know if Acer are as good as Dell at having drivers for ancient like laptops, but I could potentially downgrade it. I've actually kept it at Vista though, because I thought Vista had such a brief period of time that it's kind of unique to have a computer that runs it natively.
So I think the problem with Vista, when Vista came out, and this is a little bit off topic, it was everyone said, get Vista. Vista's, and it just needed a lot of RAM, a faster processor, and then a lot of people didn't have the RAM it needed, didn't have the processor. So I've a while ago, we're going for the garage, and I found a laptop, and it was my girlfriend's old laptop, and it was Windows Vista on there. So I got that, and I probably talked about this before, and I popped in a CD, an SSD into it. I bought some RAM for about £6 off eBay. So put loads more RAM in it, and actually it's a good experience. It's not. Once it's got an SSD in there, once it's got a bit more RAM, it's got the correct processor, then actually it's not as bad as sort of people make out. Yeah. And I'm sure on day one, if you've got an underpowered machine, it's awful.
I've actually I'm near sort of my sort of PC, a selection of some of the PC games that I've got physical copies of. I literally just pulled out a couple of them, and I've got Pro Evolution Soccer 2008, and that was what I actually installed on that Windows Vista laptop, because that game is a pain to get going on a modern computer. And you might not be able to get it working at all. I mean, I really like Pro Evolution Soccer 2008, but to play it now, I actually just run a PS3 emulator and play the PS3 version, because it's easier to get that running than it is the native PC version. But I mean, this is Windows XP, needs a Pentium 4 1.4 gigahertz. 512 megabyte RAM. DirectX 9 is what it needs. And then I've got Mass Effect Trilogy. And that can run on Windows XP Service Pack 3. and I assume that is all 3 games will work on Windows XP. So, and that's a fairly modern game, and you could potentially run that on a computer that could run DOS games all the way up to the last sort of Mass Effect that came out right at the end of the era of Xbox 360, and there was some weird stuff as well, like I think you've had to deal with issues with games for Windows Live, which is that very early implementation of Xbox Live for the PC, which I think you could install in XP, because that would have been the very end of the XP.
I'll be honest, anything that's got that bar at the top that says games for Windows, I sort of avoid. And if it's got that bar at the top, I won't touch it.
Yeah. Well, I'm actually holding in my hand Gears of War, the PC version, which is the version that I went through and completed the game with. I never played the Xbox 360 version, and this is games for Windows Live. But yeah, the system requirements are Windows Vista or Windows XP. And yeah, I mean, go on. Sorry, Stu.
Oh yeah, I wouldn't mind getting that, but I'll be surprised if I could get it running, because obviously my computer you don't want to connect it to the internet. So,
you've got the Ultimate Edition of the first Gears of War now, which will just work on like your your whatever computer you use for your gaming, up to date Windows gaming computer.
Exactly.
More Ultimate Edition on Game Pass.
Game Pass, exactly. So that's there.
Yeah.
But to be honest with you, I completed that, and then I completed the original one, and to sort of go back and do it again, I haven't quite got the. I don't really feel like I need to complete it a third time.
Yeah, annoyingly, the 2 and 3 never came out on, or 4. Maybe 4 did, but 2 and 3 never came out on the PC, and they haven't made a Gears of War 2 Ultimate Edition or 3 Ultimate Edition, so you can play 2 versions of 1 on the PC, and then 4 and 5. And is there 6? Or isn't there 6 yet? Is there 5? Is the last one?
No, not 6.
So, so yeah, but it also is an interesting era because it was, as someone that prefers to game with a controller, it was kind of that scenario where it was starting to become a bit more standard. Controllers are becoming a bit better. I mean, controllers have been around in the 90s for the PC. Well, in the 80s, I think they're probably controllers, joysticks. Maybe not maybe not the sort of pads that you had on consoles. But when you got to the XP era, I mean, the Xbox 360, really, when that came out in the sort of latter half of the XP era, Microsoft made a big push to make the 360 controller compatible with Windows, including XP. You just had to download a driver. I think when you got to Windows 7, I think it was built in. Yeah, so you could use a controller certainly for a game like Pro Evo and Gears of War. Like I just said, that works with a 360 controller. Have you had trouble with like other games that perhaps are just before that era, or have you just sort of I'm just going to use the keyboard and mouse?
The only I've had a few games like Max Payne just didn't work. Actually, Battlefield 2, which I read out earlier, that didn't work. But then a few games. Do you remember the game Kingpin?
Yes, I do.
Yeah. I remember playing that, and I put it in, and I went to press W to walk forward, and it was like nothing happened. But then the mouse was doing stuff, but the controls were just hold on. It was before people worked out that WASD is the best way to control your character.
Yeah. So it was like the arrow keys or something, yeah.
Exactly. It was the arrow keys and something else, and it was just. I think I've got to play around with the controls on that one to change it to. Well, see if I can change it to WASD, because I think that'll be a lot easier. But then I think that's. It's hard to describe, but games have different ways of working because when you're playing for example games now, you hide behind a tree and your life regenerates, and when you play games it's like you run out of life, and then you've got to find keys. Every game had to find keys to get through doors. That was what you had to do, and there was all these sort of quite old mechanics that you don't get in games anymore. So I think what I like to play is sort of games which have kind of got more modern mechanics, but are a little bit older. And, you know, I'm playing through Call of Duty 4 at the moment, which, you know, had the old, you know, hide behind a car or a building, wait till your health regenerates, and then pop out and try and shoot everyone. And that's not reality.
I don't think that had that didn't have controller support either, even though that was well into the Xbox sort of era. Weirdly, I think that's just keyboard and mouse as well. I think it was actually until like World at War or Black Ops 1 or something that was the first ones that had controller support on the PC. So
I don't. Yeah. I think I played one of the FIFA 23. That's the only thing I've actually played with a controller. It's always been, and over the last year since I've got my sort of modern PC and then my older PC, you know, keyboard and mouse has become, you know, the real sort of, actually that's what I want to be using. And it's quite interesting because today is what's it, Hellblade 2 Secura's or whatever it is.
The sequel to Hellblade 1. Of course, of course Hellblade 2 is a sequel to Hellblade 1. Kind of self-explanatory, that one.
I think people knew that. So from my point of view is I always have this sort of dilemma. It's like, well, shall I play it on my PC or shall I play it on... And because it's a sort of a semi sort of fighting game, it seems actually that's something I should play with a controller. So I'll download it on my Xbox rather than my gaming PC. That's just where it feels, you know, right to play it. But I was sort of going to ask, you know, you sort of mentioned earlier or in the pre-conversation that you've just managed to complete Red Dead Redemption 2. I think it's taken you about 5 years to complete that, Trev.
Basically, yeah. I got it when it came out on the Xbox. I was playing it on the Xbox One X, which obviously looked amazing on that. And I just kind of got bored of it, I think. I got a decent way into it, probably about 40% into it. Like there's sort of 6 chapters, and then there's kind of an epilogue. And I think I got, you know, near the end of the third chapter. And when I got, and funny enough, when I got the Steam Deck, I thought, oh, that would be a great, because a lot of people, it was one of the first games people were trying on it was Red Dead Redemption 2. Because to play a game like that on a handheld was that's something that the Switch wasn't really capable of doing at that time. So it's better to try that on a handheld. You know, a lot of people were most excited about when it came to the Steam Deck. So it did occur to me like, I should get, and the PC version. They obviously released a PC version after the Xbox version, hence why you could play it on the Steam Deck. And I was like, oh, maybe I should look into that. But the trouble is, I was trying to find a cheap copy of it, but all the cheap codes that you can get online are for the Rockstar Social Club or the Rockstar Store version. On Steam, it's like 60 quid, and it still is. There have been sales of it, but it's nothing significant. So, you know, you can get it, but you have to jump through some hoops to get it running on a Steam Deck. But I eventually found it was on sale, I think, on the Rockstar Store, because I'm signed up to it because I had to when I sort of a bunch of Rockstar games that I've got, like GTA 4 and 5. You need to, you know, download the Rockstar launcher and sign up to it and all that stuff to be able to play those games. Real pain in the ass. So I went and bought it. It was like £12 or something, really cheap. And I actually got it going on my Legion Go, and it ran fine. And I actually got through a decent amount of the campaign on that. Then again, I kind of stopped. I think I started playing Control on my Steam Deck, and that kind of took over a little bit. But recently, I was like, you know what? Maybe I should just try and get it going on my Steam Deck, because I just prefer to play games on that if I'm able to get them going. So I got the Rockstar launcher working on the Steam Deck, which is fairly straightforward, but it is a few steps to get going. And I downloaded Red Dead Redemption 2 within that launcher. And I got it working on the Steam Deck, the version that I had in the Rockstar version. And having it, you know, on the Steam Deck meant I ended up just absolutely powering through it. And I completed it just at the weekend just gone. Kind of as a mixture of, you know, handheld play and also connecting it to a dock and playing it on my TV. The great thing about when I was sort of playing it on the TV, I could actually bump up. There is some overhead there that I could sort of lock the frame rate to 30. I know, heaven forbid, right, playing a PC game at 30.
Loser.
Which is basically, kind of how it is on the console versions of it. There's nothing, completely outlandish. But I was able to play it, lock it to 30, and that gave me a bit of extra overhead to sort of bump up the resolution, and I could actually get it to sort of lock to 30 and have it running at like 1600 by 900 resolution, which still looks pretty decent on my TV. Obviously, it's 1280 by 800 just on the actual screen of the Steam Deck, but you could actually play when you're playing it on the Steam Deck. You could even, I put all the settings down to low, still looks great on that little screen. And you can even nudge up the frame rate so it can sort of hover around 40. So 40 feels really nice and fluid when you're playing it in handheld mode. But I was played it a decent amount just with the Steam Deck docked on my TV, and I really enjoyed it. Managed to complete it in the end. And I actually bought Red Dead Redemption 1. I mean, I completed the first game years ago on the Xbox 360, and it was a game I loved the first game as well. But I did have the Switch version lying around, which I picked up when I was on holiday, when I was in Gibraltar. So I talked before about how it's great a great place to get cheap games. And I actually started sort of playing that first game on the Switch, because also there's no PC version of the first game. You can run, PS3 emulator. You could get it on our PCS3 and run it on that. But I was like, I can't be bothered, I'll just throw the cartridge in my Switch. And
there are rumours that it is going to come out.
Yeah, apparently it is.
Yeah, so they were talking about it yesterday on Digital Foundry, but as in, someone had done a data mine, and I don't see why they're just leaving money on the table there, because if they can get it to work on a 360, PS4, Switch, I don't see why they wouldn't, get it on.
I don't know why it didn't come out.
Ages ago.
Why it didn't come out with that re-release. Yeah, I mean, was it last year was when it was re-released on the PS4, PS5, and the Switch? I don't know why it just come out then. But I guess they're bringing it out now, so kind of better late than never, right? But to be honest, it's the original game. I also enjoyed it when I completed it on the Xbox 360, but it is a little bit of a better experience on the Switch. If you plug it into when it's docked, it actually runs at 1080p, whereas the 360 version was 720, so it looks a bit sharper. It stays locked to 30 frames, whereas on the Xbox 360 it would drop occasionally, gunfights and things like that. Apart from that, there isn't really any difference at all. But obviously, you can have it in a handheld. I've got the Switch Lite that I can I've got two Switches, one that I often keep permanently docked, and one that I have as my handheld one, and it looks amazing on like a handheld. The gloss is taken off it a bit, having just played Red Dead Redemption 2 on a handheld, and if you're playing it in handheld mode, you could get on the OLED. You can get the battery to run. I was able to play Red Dead Redemption 2, and I would dial the TDP down to the TPD, down to like 10 watts, and lock the frame rate to 30, and you'd be able to play on that for about 3.5 hours. Red Dead Redemption 2. So I think Red Dead Redemption on the Switch, you're probably still only going to get a couple of hours out of a Switch because the battery is so small on that. But I've completed so many more PC games since I've had the Steam Deck. It's so easy just to pick it up while you just sat on the sofa. I haven't got to walk over to a desk, or even with a gaming laptop, you kind of had to, you have to get the laptop, chuck it on your legs, and get the controller hooked up. And probably isn't it, if you wanted one that was good, you would need to have really a big gaming laptop, because they need lots of ventilation, and the thin and light ones tend to be very limited. So that isn't super comfortable. But when it comes to those handhelds, again, the Legion Go and the Steam Deck, for me, it's like I always preferred handhelds since I was a little kid. And to now be at that point where they can play largely what you can on a console with some compromises, but it's the same game. You're not playing a baby version of a game that's completely different like you would have done perhaps in the PSP days. and certainly in like the Game Boy, days, it still kind of blows my mind, and that's why the rumors of an Xbox handheld, I think will be I'm very excited about that. I hope it does actually happen. That would be very cool.
100%, Trev. I think an Xbox handheld. I mean, there's all these sort of rumors about it, so no smoke without fire. But the question is, would you? Because I'm tempted to, if Red Dead Redemption 1 comes out on the PC, I'm very tempted to buy it for the simple reason that I never did the Undead Nightmare sort of DLC, so I wouldn't mind going back.
Yeah.
Since Grand Theft Auto 4, I've literally done every one of those sort of wide open games. Bully, Grand Theft Auto 5, the DLC, both the DLCs for Grand Theft Auto 4, the 2 Red Dead Redemption games. So I would like to go back and do the Undead Nightmare, which I've never got round to doing. I was a bit like, hold on, what's this? A sort of a zombie game? How does that work out? But I'd like to play that on the Steam Deck. I think that'd be amazing.
Yeah, I might end up getting. I don't know if I'll go. I do have that thing where if I try not to replay old games that I've completed, because I'm like, well, the amount of time it would take me to complete this, I could be playing something new. I mean, I'm tempted to just crack on with Tears of the Kingdom. It's obviously very similar to Red Dead Redemption 2. I started Breath of the Wild, gave up, got bored. Came back to it last year and absolutely powered through it and completed it and really enjoyed it. So, I could kind of keep that run going and start Tears of the Kingdom. That'll probably be the thing I'll do after I've nearly completed Control. So that'll be done soon. So that might be the next thing I'll do, but if I end up playing Red Dead Redemption again, that's like 9 or 10. I mean, it's a lot shorter than the second game, so you can kind of power through it, over a week if you played it every single night for a couple of hours. I probably wouldn't go that hardcore, but I'll be like, oh, God, do it. I could just play something new. But sometimes, it's just like comfort food, isn't it? It's a game I haven't got to worry about. I know what happens in it. I know the storyline. I've just come off Red Dead Redemption 2, so the controls are the same. I haven't got to remember the controls. I'm probably going to be fairly good at it because I've already done it once, so I kind of know what's coming and what you do to succeed and all of that. And it's if it's on the Switch, I could just sit there on the sofa and play it when the football's on in the background. I haven't got commandeer a TV and get it going on my 360 like I would have had to have done back in the day. I'll see how I get on. But I was playing it a little bit before we jumped back in, and it did feel good to play it again. It made me remember how much less there is to do than the second game. Like your horse you don't really do anything with it. You just ride it and just make sure it doesn't kick you off by driving it too hard. You can't there's no rearing. You can't stroke it or feed it or anything.
Is this with the first game or?
This is the first game. Yeah, there was none of that. Obviously, we didn't know any better when that was the only Red Dead Redemption. But
because I thought in there. It was quite funny because I played the first one, let's say halfway through, and then for one reason or another, I stopped playing it. Then a year or two later, Red Dead Redemption 2 came out, so I got that and I absolutely loved it. Played it from start to finish. And one of the characters in there was the main character from the first game. So John Marston, I forgot the name. So it was quite funny when you sort of going back and you're like, hold on, he looks similar, but he looks different. And
obviously
I kind of know what happened in the past. I can't remember the story now, but I know what happened in the past or the future or whatever. And
it's a bit weird. Yeah. And also, in the first game, there are things that are quite significant that happen in the second one that he doesn't mention in the first one because that game hadn't been made. The guy you play as in Red Dead Redemption 2, Arthur, he is obviously quite an important part of John Marston's kind of life in that second game. But obviously, he doesn't get mentioned. It's kind of, it's almost crying out for, they probably don't want a remake of Red Dead Redemption 1 because it would rather people just make new stuff, right? But if they do a remake, I'm sure they'll put a lot more stuff from Red Dead Redemption 2 in there. Like he'll probably talk about Arthur and how, you know, he hung out with that gang for all those years. And I'd rather did a Red Dead Redemption 3 where you play as his kid, which is what you do at the very end of the first game for like a couple of like one final mission. You play as like a grown-up Jack, which is very, very well done, by the way. That actually caught me by surprise when I played the first game originally. I thought, you know, spoiler alert for anybody that hasn't played Red Dead Redemption.
If they haven't played it, if they haven't played it yet, then that's their own fault.
Yeah, it's 14 years old.
It didn't come out yesterday, did it? So
exactly. But yeah, I'd rather did a Red Dead Redemption 3 where you played as his son and he goes on adventures and does whatever. And I don't want to know, maybe, but you know what they're like? They'll do like a prequel to Red Dead Redemption 2 or something, and it'll just be.
Did you ever play
like that.
Red Dead Revolver?
I didn't know, but obviously it is part of that series, isn't it? And kind of weirdly, it was like a Capcom game, wasn't it, or something originally?
Yeah, I think
and then Rockstar
they took it over. I can't quite remember the story, but it's that obviously.
But it's not John Marston, or there's nothing to do with that gang that we have in the other two games. It's like a completely, I guess, in the same universe, but not. No one appears in it basically that you would be familiar with otherwise.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind getting it on the Xbox and sort of going back and sort of playing it, but.
I don't think it came out on I think it just came out on the consoles, didn't it? Yeah, Xbox.
Yeah, PlayStation 2 and Xbox. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah, I might have to investigate that. Maybe. I mean, they should probably. You'd be better off re-releasing that. Really, as a lot of people wouldn't even know that was part of that wider franchise. What about Sunset Riders? Oh, that's a great game, by the way, Sunset Riders. So, if you're looking for a game of that nature. A retro game of that nature, check it out on the Super Nintendo and the Mega Drive. Although original copy is very expensive, so just get actually you can get it on the Switch and I think the PS4. Those arcade archives releases. It's on them, so you can give that a go. So if you like Western theme, I'm not even into Westerns really. I don't, apart from Back to the Future Part 3. I'm not really into. No, not really. No, but I think I prefer Red Dead Redemption to Grand Theft Auto. You know, it's not from GTA. I love the GTA games, but
I think Red Dead Redemption had a brilliant story, and there are a few things that really thought, oh man, you go in there with a computer game, and that was quite unusual. But then I do love the sort of the anarchy of Grand Theft Auto 5 and all the in jokes about society and things like that.
Oh yeah.
I think Grand Theft Auto to me just pips the post, but it's almost like trying to choose your favourite child. In reality, you probably got a favourite.
There's things you can't do.
Most. Yeah.
Yeah, there's things you can't do in Red Dead Redemption that obviously are great in Grand Theft Auto, like all the in games like golf and tennis and silly little things like that, and even the radio stations. And obviously, you can't do any of that stuff in a Red Dead game. But they're not really. It's kind of it's not an apples to apples comparison. That's not entirely fair to compare them, but. But anyway, so, Stu, where can you find us on the internet?
We are everywhere. We're all over it. We're on.
We are.
There's a new. Do you know Twitter? It's changed its name.
I'm aware of X.
Yep. You just got my thunder, Trev. Twitter changed its name to X, so you can find Console Shock on Twitter. Now called X.
What's Twitter? X. Oh, right. Okay.
You can find us on YouTube. You can find us on Facebook. We have a website and any podcast client that you may be using. So Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts. We're everywhere.
We are indeed. So thank you, everybody, as always, for listening to the show. And we will see you in the next one. Take care.
Take it easy, guys. Bye-bye.